I'm Taylor Vick, and this is the Real Estate Fund Insider. We're pulling back the curtain on how to grow wealth and passive income through real estate investment funds. Today, we've got Greg DuPont with us. Greg is a multi-disciplinary lawyer with a lot of experience in all kinds of fields. Greg, why don't you tell us a little bit about what you do and kind of how you got started?
Hi, Taylor. Thanks for the opportunity to appear on your podcast here. So yeah, as you said, I am a multidisciplinary lawyer. I've been practicing law since 1992. I started out as an estate planning, tax, and business attorney. Over the years, that has expanded as I took more of a true fiduciary role for my clients, being a single point of responsibility for their estate planning, essentially. So now I have three related companies. I have my law firm of DuPont and Blumensteel, located in Dublin, Ohio, as well as a financial advisory firm, DuPont Wealth Solutions, and a tax firm, Ohio Tax Advocates. All three work together to try to provide, like I said, a single point responsibility and solution for people as they try to accumulate, preserve, and pass on their assets to their chosen beneficiaries.
You know, one of the things we do with our private portfolio clients is we say, you know, we need to talk to your CPA, we need to talk to your financial advisor, and we need to talk to your estate planner. I mean, those are the three-legged stool kind of thing for that. Greg, I don't know if you know this, but I've got a little legal experience too. I did a pre-LSAT class at Clemson, so pretty dangerous there.
There you go.
I also thought I wanted to be an estate planning attorney. So my dad set a meeting up with me for about three or four estate planning attorneys. And what I learned is that they're extremely skilled with technical reading, and they do a lot of reading of tax laws, tax codes, and documents as well. And I knew that wasn't for me because that's not a skill set I have, but very admirable what you guys do between synthesizing all the knowledge coming in and then applying it to someone's life, really.
I learned early on that I'm closer to you, Taylor, than those other guys. When it comes to some of the detail work, I'm more of a big picture guy, and I've got members of my team that I bring in to fill in the details. Because as you mentioned, so many times the standard go-to for talking to somebody about estate planning is, let's get your CPA, let's get your financial advisor, let's get your attorney. And I'm sure that for every person that you said, I want to see all those people, about 60% of them didn't have all three of them.
Yeah. So we won't take in clients who don't, because they're not in the right, for us, they're not in the right position for us to do the private services. But yes, that does happen.
Yeah.
So, you know, some of them, they're almost like, wait, I'm supposed to have an accountant, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Yeah.
yes, you are.
Yeah. You're dealing with real estate and rentals. Yes. It's a good idea to have an accountant, but yeah, many people, they need to have all of those disciplines brought together for them to be able to decide what are the right solutions for them, especially when it involves real estate. And they balk at, well, I've got to pay for this guy, that guy, and that guy to all meet in the same room so that you can talk to them. So that's when I decided back in the day, it was about 17 years ago now, to bring all of those tools together under that one point of responsibility that is my office and my team.
Now, yeah, I'm not a specialist in your industry, but to me, that seems like, you know, something unique to your firm. Is that kind of what sets you guys apart, or what else is unique about you guys that sets you apart from others?
Well, that is the primary differentiator for us, but also as an offshoot of that, because of my drive to be a true advocate for my clients' finances and my team that I've been able to develop and the source I've been able to provide, I've got far-ranging resources that most people that are calling themselves financial advisors or estate planning attorneys or tax planners, they don't have. Because they have these silos that they all work through that tend to form biases and prevent people from getting the right solutions for a situation.
That's great. So who is the client for estate planning or for your services? I mean, is it just the 1%, the wealthiest people, or is it really anyone? What is kind of the ideal client, or the kind of the range of clients that need these services?
Well, I'll separate out my higher level services from the need for estate planning in
Okay.
general. I
Yeah.
mean, everybody that has an asset in their name has a reason to have some form of estate plan, whether that is just your basic health documents, your living will, your power of attorney for healthcare, those type of things that make your wishes known, financial powers of attorney, those type of things that give people the ability to take care of things for you, and wills. So everybody needs to have those basic things in place. And the reason I say everybody is some of the more expensive estates that I've had to take care of with my team have been, young people that started a portfolio of real estate, haven't taken care of getting themselves these documents. Maybe they've got real estate in different states, and then something happens, and now we're dealing with estates in different estates, and it becomes a disproportionate cost for the situation. So we start accumulating assets. You need to have some basic estate plan in place.
Yeah, I know what we see. And like I said, I took an LSAT prep course, so I'm pretty dangerous. Literally, I don't know enough. I'm dangerous. But what I see in South Carolina a lot, especially in regards to real estate, is you have someone who owns real estate, and maybe their kids want it, maybe they don't, but they think, okay, it'll just pass on to them. Then they pass away, and well, actually, if you have a spouse, it goes 50% to them, and then it's divided equally between the children. Then you've got children who can't agree on things or who fight, and it just causes a real mess. They have to work through probate. So we see that a lot here. What are some of the biggest risks of not having an estate plan set up that you see out there?
Well, you just hit on one of the major ones, obviously, because like you see down there, I see it here, I see it everywhere. I work with people throughout the country, and the failure to put the appropriate structures around real estate can be very problematic. And so, with that, we're thinking about things like, how does those asset gets transferred down to kids? How do you put a proper trust structure in place to take care of that situation you just talked about, where part of it's going to spouses, part of it's going to kids, those type of things. So, in your world where real estate is king, it's absolutely imperative that people have somebody giving them legal guidance as to how to set up these structures.
Yeah. And that's one reason why our higher clients that are having the private portfolios, why they have to have an estate planner before we can do anything, because it's such an intricate part of that. We are looking at everything from a multi-generational standpoint as well. What I also see a lot with real estate is dad owned a lot of stuff, but that was kind of his thing, and we don't want anything to do with it. And when he passes away, they just immediately sell it because they can't manage it. They have no interest in it. What we are able to provide is kind of like you said, with trusts or other investments, it is able to pass on to the next generation, and they don't have to do anything. We do the management, we do the banking, the refinancing, if that's appropriate, the disposition. So it just really makes for an easy transition through the estate without creating work for those inheriting it.
And as we're talking about who needs my services or services of an estate planner, when we're talking about portfolios like that, when the portfolios are worth millions of dollars,
right?
People need to be thinking about estate taxes,
Yes.
and the tools that need to come in to preserve that asset, provide liquidity to take care of paying taxes, or at least giving time for a reasonable market-based liquidation of the assets instead of a fire sale.
That's something we work with our clients on as well. Just, hey, what are major liquidity events that you're either going to receive a lot of liquidity or need it, and how do we plan your real estate portfolio in conjunction with your other investments around that? So estate tax is a great one. We've had it structured before where we've got an asset that is going to be ready for disposition basically at any time. So if someone passes away, we can then sell that asset, with short notice to achieve the highest price to pay some of those estate taxes or really any other kind of major expense our clients may have. Greg, let me ask you this. How do you plan around real estate investment funds with your clients? That's a big thing that Blue Ridge Asset Management does. People either investing in partnerships or becoming a limited partner for a larger syndication. How does that play into what you do?
Well, again, as I pointed out earlier, part of the thing that makes us unique is although we are attorneys, tax advisors, as well as investment guys, we're not associated with any type of investment house. So we look at all of the assets that are out there, and real estate is an incredibly important part of many of our clients' overall investment package. And so tools like Blue Ridge, provide that ability that when people get tired of playing landlord,
exactly.
moving it into professional management, that becomes a huge value proposition for clients as they are trying to figure out what's next in life. And as you mentioned in your earlier comments about, if we don't want to liquidate it, we want to preserve the asset for the family in the next generations. How do we take care of that when our kids have no desire or acumen to do it?
That's great, because I see that a lot where people don't think through that. With real estate specific to estate planning, what are some of the unique aspects there versus other asset classes when you're doing estate planning?
Well, you got to obviously start with the lack of liquidity, which makes real estate in most situations, an incredibly different type of asset to work with. And also with so many people that have a real estate portfolio, having leverage on it. We have a portfolio that's worth, $10, $15 million. That's highly leveraged. And someone passes away, Uncle Sam comes calling for its estate tax based upon the 15. How do we figure out that? What are the right tools to preserve the integrity of that investment and pass it on down? And so it is challenging when you're talking about people that have a good sizable real estate portfolio, trying to and keep it intact. Tools like yours is one way to do that. But unfortunately, too many people don't even look into tools like Blue Ridge.
Yeah. And Greg, why don't you give us kind of a quick primer on estate taxes? I think there's a lot of misconceptions out there, also colloquially known as the death tax. How does that work? I think some people think pay it on everything when you die. I think you bring up an important point that, hey, it's based on the asset value, not necessarily the equity that you have. Give us a quick run through of how estate tax works. I know it's extremely complicated, but that's why we have you. But
yeah, and I'll keep it at a high level. But there are two taxes that people need to understand come to bear potentially when one person passes away. First is the deferred income tax on their retirement savings. Too many people don't appreciate the fact or understand the fact that when they're sitting on $1 million IRA, there's a good chance that 40% of that goes to the IRS sooner rather than later. Under the Secure Act a couple of years ago, before then, we were able to stretch it out over the recipient's lifetime, not any longer. Now it's 10 years if it's not a spouse. And with our current economic climate, I contend that within the next handful of years, that 10 years is going to be reduced to 0. So people need to be aware of that, especially if you're in a situation, a real estate investor that has, a self-directed IRA with real estate in it. How are we going to liquidate those properties to be able to take care of that? Okay. So then we have the pure estate tax on top of the income tax. Now, back when I started practicing law 30 years ago, we used to plan for estate taxes when we had a estate in excess of $600,000. Okay, because back then, your estate tax, when it kicked in right around 1.2 if you had spouses, and it kicked in at 40% essentially. Okay. Wow. So the standard of care back then was to start doing estate tax planning when we had estates in excess of $600,000, and understand that for a federal estate tax evaluation, that includes real estate, investments, insurance, essentially everything. Okay, so it can very quickly add up. We've become a little bit desensitized to it because of the Trump Tax Cut and Job Act and other changes along the way that make the threshold fairly high. We need to have estates in excess of millions of dollars now before it kicks in. But that ends in 2025 and drops back down to just a few $1,000,000. Who knows where it's going to be at that point in time? Many commentators suggest that it's going to settle at around 3 million at this point in time. We don't know, but the takeaway for your clientele is, and you've got a real estate portfolio in millions of dollars. There's a good chance that there's going to be a estate tax levy that needs to be paid, and that theoretically needs to be paid within 9 months of death.
Oh, wow.
And it kicks in again at around 40%. So it can be incredibly, shall we say, destabilizing for the family.
Yeah, that's awful. I think the old example I always heard, and tell me if this is accurate, at a very high level. Dad has a farm. The farm's worth $10 million. It's all he's got. He passes it on to the family. They have to pay taxes on that inheritance, and the only way to pay it is to sell the farm. I mean, is that?
Yeah, you got it. And things are even more tricky when we're talking about estate planning than simply that tax, because that dad that wants to pass on that farm to the family, well, not only do we have to worry about taxes, but we also have to worry about the potential for long-term care kicking in at the tail end of one's life. And then having the government put a lien against the property for that cost of care. So when we want to preserve, protect, and transfer our assets, it's a thin, we got to thread the needle to try to protect against all those different risks.
Awesome overview. Can you give us some examples of where you've worked with a client and seen a lot of great success, a really good outcome?
Well, hearkening back to that farm example, many clients that I deal with want to do just that. Their kids may not necessarily be running the farm in the future, but they want to preserve the land for them and let somebody else run it. And in order to protect and preserve and transfer those assets, we use an irrevocable trust. Put the farm into that irrevocable trust. We can do that without any tax ramifications, and then that is protected from long-term care, able to be passed on. And if you had a more valuable piece of property, then we can add to that limited liability companies and transfer through gifting processes, those kind of things. So that's an example of how we've been able to help people that way. Another example of how we've been able to help people, deal with specifically the liquidity issue with having a real estate portfolio is through some of our strategic relationships. We're able to get access to some very unique insurance lending type of programs, collateral only loans, bonded loans. So essentially where you've got a $20 million real estate portfolio and we get insurance that you don't have to pay a dime for, and you get a tax deduction on that provides that liquidity to be able to preserve that asset or to convert it down the road, however that works. And some of those times that's even being able to be accessed down the road for income for the person that's the insured for their own retirement, to deal with liquidity, those type of things.
Is that what I've heard referred to as bank financed life insurance?
There are those type of programs. Okay. Ours are different and candidly have less risk than bank financed insurance because of what we're able to do with that. And Taylor, on the lower end of the spectrum, people that are just starting to build out their real estate portfolio before they're in a spot where maybe they need your services. We've been able to work with people like that that have properties in different states, maybe even different LLCs in different states, put their assets into a living trust so that you're able to gain control. Unfortunately, the one that comes to mind was a investor like that that I've met the first part of this year, and he had properties in 4 different states that we had to put into an LLC and then into their living trust. And he passed away, just a few months ago. And because of what we did, instead of having his family have to deal with the real estate in the different states, they were able to deal with it through the structure of the living trust. So made things, although difficult, still much easier than they would have been elsewise, and preserve value. So those are just some examples of how proper estate planning can come into play to help preserve, protect, and transfer assets.
So Greg, we deal exclusively with real estate investors here at Blue Ridge. When should someone who's investing in real estate or even thinking about real estate, what's the proper time to contact someone like you?
If you have any real estate that is in an investment mode, maybe not necessarily just owning a home with the rights to survivorship type situation, but when you start having any type of investment property, you really need to have an attorney involved. It's easy to get LLCs set up and those kind of things. And because it's so easy to do that, people do it themselves and get themselves in trouble. So you do need to have a guiding hand for the estate side of things in case something happens. We are not immortal. And especially when you're dealing with leverage situations, that you're trying to preserve some of the asset value for your heirs, you need to have an experienced estate planner working with you to be able to show you the tools to take care of that.
Greg, one thing that we talk about a lot with our clients is step-up basis. Can you go over how that works and how it's part of an estate plan?
So the step-up in basis is the gift that the IRS gives us. It's one of the few that are still out there, and that is kind of the exit strategy for many people in real estate, because they get so upside down with recapture, right?
Yes.
So they have to, unless they can find another exchange or a DST to put it into, that type of thing, their only exit strategy is to hold it to the end. And at that point in time, if you die with the ownership of the property, then the value will increase for tax purposes to the value that's established for the date of death. And that means that the tax basis has been stepped up to the value at that point in time. So from that point on, heirs get it, they can sell it, then then their gain is only that differential between what it was when you died and what they sell it at. As opposed to if they gifted it away, and I've seen this over and over and over again, where they don't bring an estate planner involved, and dad gives little Johnny the farm. Well, when little Johnny goes to sell it, it goes all the way back to what dad bought it at, in terms of the tax basis. So the step up in basis is something that really needs to be planned for. And so, if you're looking for guidance, it's very easy for an attorney to do a will, but not all of them are estate planners.
Right.
And if you do have a portfolio, let's call it $1 million. You got a serious amount of potential liability in terms of taxes if things aren't done the right way, or exposure to the probate process. Across the country, the standard is between 3 and 5% cost to administer a probate estate. So if you have $1 million, you do the math what 3% of that would be. That would be potentially your cost of administrating Johnny's farm. So look for an estate planner that knows tax law, that knows the ability to use trust, not just wills. And I believe this is, again, what makes us distinguishable from others. That person should absolutely have more than just a working knowledge of the investment tools and real estate tools and all those things, because the estate plan brings it all together. Unless you've got good guidance on that, and you've got some assets, you could be looking for trouble.
Tell me if I'm summarizing this correctly, but kind of what I heard there is if someone owns real estate and they want to give it to, say, their son, if they bought it for $1 million and it's worth 10 million and they give it to their son, if their son sells it, he's going to have to pay taxes on at least, he sells it for 10 million, at least 9 million. Plus, if there's depreciation or anything else that lowered that basis below $1 million. So he's going to be paying taxes on 9 million plus. However, if it went through the estate, he could sell it for 10 million and pay 0 in taxes. So you're talking about, a $3 million swing, right?
Yeah.
Potentially.
Absolutely.
I mean, that's huge. That's huge. And, who would think that, right? Either way, you're giving it to your son, but you followed one mechanism that makes perfect sense to anyone, but it's just so different for the tax all the way that's written. And I bet there's 1,000 things like that you would never even think about, but have huge tax consequences.
Absolutely. You got that right on there, Taylor. Yeah.
Yeah. Another thing when talking about step up basis, we talk about, 1031s or advise on those. So a 1031 is when you sell one piece of property and you buy another one and you don't have to pay capital gains tax on your gain. However, it is deferred, not eliminated, meaning if you sell that piece of real estate later, you have to pay the taxes you deferred. So when walking through this with people, they say, well, how do I get rid of the taxes? I'm just carrying them around. I say, well, you got a 1031 till you die. You got to shop till you drop kind of thing. And, they think it's funny, but the real point is if you integrate it into your estate plan, you can defer taxes on real estate for basically your entire life. You could sell a piece of real estate conservatively, maybe every 2 years, and 1031 exchange, keep trading up to more and more valuable properties, never pay the taxes, and use that as a powerful estate planning tool. When it does pass through your estate, you may have a basis of, it could even be 0, or maybe just the land value of the first, it's just something very, very small that you could build into a $200 million portfolio, or, maybe more conservatively for most people, say even a $5 million portfolio that would be taxed on 4 million or more, maybe even 4.5 billion, that can just go on to the next generation. And you've never paid taxes on it your entire life. You've been able to trade up into better and better properties. And then you're able to pass on something through your estate that can either be sold to pay estate taxes or used for whatever they'd like.
That's the gift that keeps on giving right now. The step up base. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. So Greg, what's happening in the estate planning world? What's happening in the world in which you operate that you can give us some updates on?
So right now, when we're talking about preserving and protecting and transferring assets, estate planning, retirement planning, you whatever frame you want to put around that, what's going on right now is a lot of people trying to find ways to preserve their estate from taxes, whether it is the income tax that's in their old IRAs and all that stuff that they're now realizing, hey, 2025, the tax laws are going to change and we're going to get smacked. Or they're realizing, hey, we don't need all of this money out here for now. And things called RMDs, required minimum distributions, are going to come back to really give them problems with income tax in the future. So a lot of people come to us saying, Greg, we want to preserve as much of this legacy as possible. We want to be able to live our life the way we want to live it, but we don't want to pay any more taxes than we have to. How can we fix this problem? And that's what keeps us very busy, fixing that problem.
Are there any geographical limitations to your clients? I mean, are you just Ohio? And if people want to contact you, what's the best way to get in touch?
So Taylor, I am only licensed to practice law in the state of Ohio, but our practice does reach across the country in the sense that we work with people throughout all of the states with regard to tax planning, putting the structures together, and then when it comes to the documents that would be specific to, say, Greenville, we have a network of co-counsel that we bring in to be able to serve things, get things done according to local standards and not being worried about practicing law in states I'm not allowed to. So yeah, we do work with people throughout the country, and that's part of our distinguishing factors as well. And so to get a hold of me, you can get a hold of me directly by emailing me at greg@D&B Law. That's D as in DuPont, the word and, then B as in boy. I'll spare you the name, my partner's name, law.com. And I also am available on the podcasting platform. Any podcasting platform you go, it's Your Financial Advocate is the name of my podcast. And lastly, if anybody wants to reach out by the good old-fashioned phone, you can reach out to me at 614-408-0529.
Well, Greg, got to say thanks for coming on today. Really a pleasure. At your high-level overviews, the amount of knowledge is immense and great learning for me as well on some of those subjects. So I can only imagine how intricate the details are and how much knowledge you have in regards to estate planning and financial planning and tax planning. Greg, a big thanks for coming on today, and hopefully we'll have you on in a future episode as well.
Taylor, thanks for having me on. I look forward to another conversation on another day.